In 1945, German women prisoners arrived at a remote British camp, expecting humiliation and cruelty. They had been warned they would be stripped, mocked, and paraded. Fear followed them as they stepped into the cold English air, bracing for the worst. Most of the women were exhausted, malnourished, and terrified. Some were barely 18, others veterans of the German Women's Auxiliary Corps. All had survived months of retreat, hunger, and chaos, and all believed captivity would mean suffering or death. Instead of shouting guards, they saw British soldiers in clean uniforms. No weapons were raised. Orders were calm. A translator informed them they were prisoners of war, protected by the Geneva Convention, and would be medically examined and provided for. The words meant little to the women. Propaganda had warned them the British would be cold and merciless. None of those stories prepared them for wooden huts smelling of fresh timber, disinfectant, and something shocking, real food cooking nearby. Elsa, a 21-year-old switchboard operator from Frankfurt, clutched her only possessions: a locket, a photo, and a prayer book. Months of hunger had aged her beyond her years. Beside her stood Hilda, hardened by watching Hamburg burn. Medical staff, real nurses, moved efficiently through the hut. There were no interrogations, no threats. Just routine questions, clipped answers, and professional care. Each woman was processed with quiet efficiency, treated like a patient, not an enemy. When Elsa was examined, fear surged again. She expected humiliation. Instead, the doctor spoke gently and checked her health with care. Then she was directed toward another door for delousing and bathing, a word that filled her with dread. Rumors of fake showers and death flooded her mind. She walked forward, certain this was the moment cruelty would appear. But behind the door came the unmistakable sound of running water, steady, real, and continuous. Inside were private stalls, towels, and bars of white soap. A female guard explained calmly, 20 minutes, hot water, privacy. The women hesitated, searching for a trap, until Hilda stepped forward and turned on a shower. Hot water poured down, steaming in the cool air. Elsa stood frozen, then began to cry as months of grime washed away. It wasn't punishment, it was mercy. The enemy had not broken them with cruelty, but with cleanliness and dignity. When the bathing ended, the women dressed in clean utility clothes and were led to the cookhouse. The smell of boiling potatoes and vegetables filled the air. It was unmistakably real food, not scraps or substitutes, and the shock left many frozen in disbelief. British soldiers ate alongside them, receiving the same rations. There was no segregation, no spectacle. Elsa stared at her tray: potatoes, thick vegetable stew with bits of meat, bread and tea. It was more food than she had seen in a year. For a long moment, no one ate. Then a young woman took one bite and began to cry. That broke the spell. The women ate slowly, some trembling, others rushing as if the food might vanish. Tears fell silently into metal trays. After dinner, they were taken to their barracks. Inside were real bunk beds, blankets, pillows, and lockers for personal belongings. Elsa touched the wool blanket in disbelief. She had expected straw on concrete, not warmth and privacy. The guards explained they could keep personal items, letters, books, photographs. Nothing would be taken without cause. Elsa placed her prayer book under her pillow, stunned that the enemy allowed her to keep the last pieces of her life. That night the women whispered in the dark. They talked about the bath, the soap, the food. Hot water became the subject of awe. Kindness felt more confusing than cruelty. Elsa wrote that she was clean and fed, yet ashamed. Morning brought routine. A handbell woke them, not shouting. Breakfast was oatmeal, bread and tea. Work details followed: laundry, kitchens, cleaning. The labor was light, purposeful, and paid with small camp currency. The camp canteen sold simple luxuries: chocolate, cigarettes, paper, pencils. Elsa saved her pay and bought a small bar of chocolate. She cried when she tasted it, reminded of Christmas before the war destroyed everything. Meals remained steady and sufficient. Slowly the women regained strength. Hollow faces softened, hair regained shine. They looked alive again. But every improvement carried guilt, because their families in Germany were starving. When letters arrived, the truth cut deep. Cities were rubble. Families lived in cellars, eating weeds. Elsa read of her sister's hunger while staring at her untouched dinner. Mercy no longer felt gentle. It felt unbearable. All across the camp, letters brought the same pain. Missing parents, dead siblings, destroyed homes. Women who read such news had to reconcile it with their own reality. Warm beds, full meals, and safety behind British wire. In the evenings they read letters aloud to share the burden. Each story deepened the guilt. Their families suffered in ruins while they lived with dignity as prisoners. Kindness became heavier than punishment ever could. In June, some women were assigned work outside the camp. Elsa joined a group sent to nearby farms. Riding through the countryside, she saw intact villages, clean roads, and children playing. Nothing like shattered Germany. The farm was orderly and abundant. The women cleaned stalls and assisted with equipment. During breaks, they were given bread, cheese, tea, and sometimes fresh milk. It felt unreal, almost insulting in its normalcy. Hilda finally spoke the truth aloud. This was what they had been fighting. Not armies, but a society of stability and resources. England had so much it barely noticed it. Germany had nothing left. Other work details passed through nearby towns. Shops were open. Buses ran on time. People carried shopping bags and lived ordinary lives. In England, the war was distant. In Germany, it had consumed everything. The realization settled painfully. Germany had never stood a chance against this level of organization and wealth. The belief that victory was possible now felt like a tragic illusion sustained by lies. Not all gods were warm. Some were distant or openly bitter, but others showed small kindnesses, extra tea, quiet conversations, or a gentle word that only deepened the women's inner conflict. A young guard named Corporal Davies gave Elsa a small drawing of a bird with the words, "All will be well." The message confused her more than hatred ever could. Why show hope to an enemy? She folded the paper and hid it in her prayer book. That night she cried, not from fear, but from the weight of being treated as human by someone she had been taught to hate. In the evenings, an older guard sometimes played a harmonica near the cookhouse. The women gathered quietly to listen. One night he invited them to sing. Hesitant at first, they shared German folk songs about home. The guard applauded despite not understanding the words. Music crossed what language could not. These small moments, songs, smiles, shared silence, slowly chipped away at years of fear and propaganda. Acts of kindness accumulated, extra tea on cold mornings, a nurse who explained procedures patiently, a cook who added an extra potato. None were dramatic, but together they carried enormous weight. Everything the women had been taught said the enemy was cruel. Everything they experienced said otherwise. The contradiction was exhausting. Mercy forced reflection. Hatred would have been easier to carry. By early July, the truth became undeniable. The war was over. Germany had lost. Notices posted in the camp confirmed occupation and defeat. Some women clung to denial. Others felt quiet relief. For many, defeat brought crisis. If everything they believed was false, then what had the suffering been for? The question haunted the barracks long after lights were dimmed. Elsa struggled to reconcile reality. The same enemy who bombed German cities had fed her, washed her, and given her a bed. Dignity had replaced fear, and it shattered her understanding of the war. Hilda admitted she hated the British for their kindness. Cruelty would have justified anger. Mercy forced her to question every choice and belief she had made. That pain was harder to endure. Late at night, the women talked openly for the first time. They spoke of lies, propaganda, and lost brothers. They compared what they were told with what they had lived. And the truth was unavoidable. The camp became a place of reckoning. Clean water, soap, food, and order stripped away illusions. Humanity, not violence, began dismantling the beliefs that war had built. The British had not tried to break the women with punishment. Instead, they gave them stability and space to think. In that calm, the truth emerged more clearly than it ever could under cruelty. The women realized dignity was the most powerful weapon used against them. It forced them to confront the moral collapse of their own government and the lies that had sustained the war. The hot showers, clean beds and regular meals did what bombs could not. They made the contrast between propaganda and reality impossible to ignore. As weeks passed, the women no longer spoke of victory or sacrifice. They spoke of responsibility, loss, and how easily truth could be buried beneath fear and loyalty. They understood now that hatred thrives in misery. Humanity, when offered unexpectedly, dissolves it. The British Guards had given them something far more dangerous than punishment: perspective. Eventually, repatriation loomed. The women would return to a shattered Germany carrying more than defeat. They carried the memory of mercy shown by an enemy. They would go home not as symbols of vengeance, but as witnesses. Witnesses to the fact that cruelty was not inevitable, even after years of bloodshed. They had arrived expecting death and humiliation. Instead, they received soap, hot water, food and respect. Small things that carried enormous moral weight. That kindness forced a reckoning no weapon could achieve. It exposed the emptiness of what they had been told and the cost of believing it. In the end, the enemy did not defeat them with force. They defeated them with dignity, proving that simple human decency can be the most powerful weapon of all.